let's talk about enterprise IT. So, enterprise IT must die in order for IT in the enterprise to provide value to the business. Why? Let's talk about enterprise IT. So, a good friend of mine, colleague, once asked me a very pertinent question. So, why is it that we, the big enterprise, cannot, with all our resources and people, all our hardware and competence, cannot outperform the small startups that only have a handful of developers? If you think about it, that is a very good question. And of course, there are many contributing factors to this. You can point to bureaucracy, for instance. So is it me, or is the ending of that word dangerously close to crazy? Coordination is another thing that's difficult in large organizations. But as the title sort of hints at, what I want to spend the time on here is mediocrity. And as a little disclaimer to that, I want to say that I'm talking more about mediocrity in effort rather than mediocrity in ability, like complacency. So, enterprises attract and cultivate mediocrity. How does this happen? Well, let me tell you a story. So, once upon a time, well, all stories start like this, right? So once upon a time, there was a developer working for a big company. And he'd heard that the business, they had a particular and pressing problem that they needed to solve. And so he set out to create a solution. It started out pretty small, but soon enough he saw that he would need some help to make this work. So he recruited some people to help out, and the team grew a little bit. And once they've created this wonderful solution for the business saw that they had other sort of related problems that could be solved in the same way. So over time, the solution grew, and the team with it. The years went by, right? Technologies changed, and some of the team wanted to change a little bit the solution to make it fit the times. But our hero, he wanted to keep the core of the solution the same, because this was really his baby, his gold. He thought that was the beauty of the whole thing. So he said, let them change around us. And as technology changed around him, he kept the core the same, only adding data where he needed to and changed as little as possible. And this led to a situation where some of the developers that joined the team over time got frustrated and basically left. And compounding on this, you had corporate governance requirements dictating some technology around this, and also frustrated some of the developers. And all of this was done in the best of intentions, right? In the meanwhile, also the ever-increasing demands from the business to solve new needs for them led to really a development team that stopped paying attention to the advances in the rest of the world and contented themselves on building an ever more crooked tower on their core base. So as we can see, the team finds itself in a bit of a hole. And this hole has been dug partly by the business, partly by corporate IT, and partly by our hero. All of them, as I said, with the best of intentions. So now the team has become reactive to both business requirements and also the technology development in the rest of the world instead of proactive as it should be. And really this has led to a number of problems with delivery and maintenance due to a very complex and unmaintainable solution. And this in and of itself is bad enough. But if you combine that with the current trends and movement in large enterprises, it's even worse. I guess that all of you have heard about this newfangled thing called digitalization. That's all the buzz these days, right? And although we don't really know what it means, I mean, you may think you do, but you really don't. So what we do know is that it puts an increased pressure on the IT function to not only support the business, but to start driving it. And in order to do that, we really do need flexible solutions and the best developers we can get. So, mediocrity in effort or ability is no longer something we can live with. In a series of articles, Eric Dietrich writes about a dead end in the Dreyfus model that he calls an expert beginner. And this state happens when, as an advanced beginner, you think you know everything, or as much as you need to, and start amassing years of experience just doing the same thing and never moving forward. This is basically the Dunning-Kruger effect in practice. This state is actually also cultivated by central governance, central decisions being taken in the business, because it then lets you stop thinking for yourself, basically. And having situations like in our story where developers like our hero is exalted by the business to a position that he doesn't really deserve, this leads to some of the best developers finding other projects, or at the worst case, leaving the company. And I claim that this is what leads large companies to mediocrity. So let's turn to what we can do to avoid this, right? Let's start with the people dimension. Dan Pink has written an excellent book called Drive, and if you don't want to read the book, there's an animated talk from the RSA that you can watch. He tells us that people are primarily motivated by three factors, and that's autonomy, mastery, and purpose. This means that having other people, either within the team or outside the team, telling you what you can and cannot do will decrease your motivation. So we should really let the talent, the competence, and drive of individuals, rather than position in the organization, dictate who can make the technology choices. And this will hopefully lead to more increased motivation and a higher likelihood that people and all the employees will start taking care of their own development in a better way. So always when I say this to people, I get a pushback saying that, well, as an enterprise, we only need a finite set of technologies to deal with. We cannot let everyone do what they want. That's not possible. We don't have enough power, enough people to do that. The problem is, well, there is some truth to that, but the problem is that whenever you start doing something new in an enterprise, very rarely, or if ever, do you stop doing something else. So you never phase out something old when you start doing something new. And that's a big problem. And it's very hard in enterprises, I think maybe all organizations, to move the entire group forward based on one part of the organization's discoveries. So I claim that thinking that making a technology decision, especially if this is done by a central group, and that this will solve all your problems and move everything forward, that's basically a fallacy. Things should rather be decided by the talent on the ground. That's my basic premise. I think the key to driving innovation and avoiding mediocrity in the IT business, you have to allow diversity, and I think you need to have special groups in your organization that are focused on innovation. And especially in terms of software, you have to have a group that's tasked with trying out the new stuff, building innovative solutions together with the business. But that's not enough, right? You have to get the bridge between this group and the rest of the organization in place. And this is often what is lacking in many organizations. Because the point is, if you don't have this bridge back to the rest of the organization, that will only increase the gap between the best programmers and the rest of the organization further, and give them more incentive to leave. So of course in large organizations, this doesn't have to be one single group, it can be several. And really, I really think this is the key to any kind of technology innovation, not just software innovation. You can do this in an R&D organization as well. It's very important with this feedback loop back into the rest of the organization so that you drive your whole organization further, not just the small group that's focused on R&D. The other important part is to evolve the existing portfolio as new technology methods and tools are discovered by this more innovative group. So adopting new technology is tricky enough, but having this adoption lead to the phase out of old technical debt is worse, right? So if we don't have some architectural oversight, we can end up with something like this. When we really want something like this. And I think that creating a group that has a clear responsibility of mapping and guiding the IT architecture for the whole enterprise is the key. This group can help the enterprise identify good and bad examples of software architecture that exists. Maybe mostly bad, I guess. And they can help us make sure that new solutions and the portfolio as a whole evolves in a more planned way. So I will leave you with this. Architectural oversight, I think, is an important part to have in the enterprise, but you should govern on principles and instantiated architecture patterns to guide the development of the individual components and your interactions rather than specific technology. All technology choices, I think, should be taken on by the development teams themselves. This comes back to having buy-in for all the choices that have been made. And a good model, like I say, is to have a largely independent software innovation team or group that is responsible for this, having it trickle down to the organization. So that is basically the key, bringing it all back again. And I don't claim to have an answer to this. It's not being any easier by saying it, but of course, knowing that you need it is the first step. And last but not least, avoid giving your expert beginners positions of power in your development organization. That can only lead to bad things. So, thank you very much.